Hello, classmates. My name is Tina Gote Santiago, and this is my cross-cultural presentation. I'm a little camera shy, so I chose to put a presentation together um, displaying some of the things I'll be talking about. So this project actually gave me an opportunity to really reflect on what is culture, something that we've learned throughout the lessons, and really help me define who I am, not only who I am a little bit clearer, but also identify with my own culture and realizing I'm not exactly who I thought I was, so to speak. So, in order for you to really understand what I'm saying is, I'm a Puerto Rican American, which means that I was born and raised in um, New York. But my heritage in the house, my parents spoke Spanish, but over time we only spoke English. And, we've been around many different cultures. So I actually grew up in New York. I was born and raised again in the inner city of Brooklyn in the 80s. It's a time where ethnicity and race um, would be would define you or divide you. So it's during the times where there's a lot of the background is cultural separations. Not that cultures didn't get along, but all the neighborhoods were kind of broken down. Like black people lived over here, white people lived over here, Spanish people, the Spanish community lived over here. And it'll be mixed communities of Spanish. So you'll have Puerto Rican, you have Dominican, so it's all blended. So, I also grew up in a time, throughout the city in the 90s where um, everyone began to, express their personal freedoms and rights to be who they are. So, when people started to be more open about being gay, lesbian, or bi, and expressing themselves in different ways, as you can see in the image here. But because I've had that exposure, I've been very, very open and accepting to the different types of cultures that I've been exposed to. So, growing up in the United States, in the education system, we always saluted the flag, we said the Pledge of Allegiance, transportation was always free. We got, actually more so in Florida, which is where my children have attended school. And over time, uh, the technological advances are now introduced in the schools. They're big on sports and outdoor activities, team sports and playing, very competitive with soccer and baseball and all that fun stuff. So then, so throughout my life, it's been all about, the politics. So right now, American politics is focused more on, gender equality, the right and left wing, politics of the government, the constant pull, the Me Too movement, and Black Lives Matter. So why am I bringing all this up is because now I am experiencing a new culture, which has brought me to Puerto Rico. So again, this is some of the things that we've celebrated in the United States. Sorry, I forgot to include this. Where, you have festivals and you have these big grand firework displays during the 4th of July, Halloween parades and trick-or-treating, so all this is part of who I have become as an American citizen living up in the United States, living in New York, living in Florida. So I have spent the past year here in Puerto Rico, and I'm Puerto Rican. I've always loved my culture. I've loved my food. But when I come and I live here, it's so different. And I was given the opportunity to actually compare the two cultures. And that's why I decided to make this part of my cultural experience, given the fact that, we couldn't actually go to places, because of what's going on with the coronavirus. But so just to simplify it, so now I've been spending a lot of time in the school system because I'm studying to be a teacher, and my children are actually attending school for the past year here in Puerto Rico. So what I've identified is a lot of cultural differences that I didn't know really even existed. So growing up in the United States and then coming here, it is so different, the education system, where this is actually a picture here of, one of the elementary schools here in Puerto Rico. So it's very, like, the maintenance isn't very high. The focus really isn't in the presentation of the look. You can see the concrete is not like completely cleaned and paved over regularly. But one of the biggest surprises for me is how much freedom the children actually have. So the school itself doesn't have a playground, but throughout the day, there are like periods where the teachers don't, maybe absent, or maybe they have a meeting. And during that period, the students would just kind of play throughout the school unattended. So that was kind of a really big difference, kind of like, where's the supervision here? Like, actually, my son at one point was like, oh my gosh, this is like a self-defense school, because the children are quite active. And I say that they jump over things, they climb on everything, and it's just so much freedom, and nobody really tells them to not run in the hallways, or please walk, or don't use that language. Like, so there are some of those cultural differences that kind of like really stand out to me and surprised me. And then there's the education, like I was saying, here in Puerto Rico, the community is very close. I'm very fortunate to have had the opportunity to be here, because race really isn't an issue. There's no question about somebody's sexual orientation. There's no shunning people for being different. It actually, so close knit and family orientated that I'm not used to it. I just meet a teacher and they're like kissing me on the cheek every day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just saw you yesterday. So you very reserved. The American style is you give everybody their space. And here is just so very different. When it comes to like activities in the school, everyone gets involved. I mean, like, if you see these pictures, like, everybody's parents and families are involved. The activities are huge. There's nothing small about it. And what I found is that this is the way they really keep the families bringing their children to school. So they don't do it just because they want to celebrate things, but it's really to keep the parents involved, because education here in Puerto Rico has been like a stepping stone. They're trying to really grow the community with knowledge, but it's steps, and it has to begin with getting the parents involved to bring their children to school every day so they can learn. And then they come up with project-based activities for them to participate in together, where they can celebrate the successes. So also in the education field, nothing is really guaranteed. So teachers, you'll see in the news, they go out there and they're protesting the government so that students could have more resources. And I to be honest, I try not to get into the politics here because it's so very different. But the allocation of funding throughout the government, they can do a better job with it. I mean, the schools don't have air condition. There's no elevators in the school for disabled children. The ramps are not regularly paved so that they're not as bumpy. The parking lot, there's barely any parking lot spaces, and they kind of they park on grass and things like that. So it's very different. It's not to say that it's bad. It's just the investment in education could be better. One of the shocking things for me was even that the teachers actually wound up supplying toilet papers and wipes because the schools don't provide it. It's kind of disappointing, but a basic necessity is not provided by the school systems at this time. Holiday celebrations here are very engaging, a little bit scary at times when you look at these types of masks, but you get used to it. It's part of the culture. It's actually native. The native Puerto Ricans that they call Tainos, where they actually would design these for big celebrations. And the bigger the mask, the more powerful, more horns, the more strength that you're supposed to, that it displays. So on the streets of San Juan, you know, these are some of the activities. They always acknowledge that they have a partnership with the United States. This is like a touristy area uh, where it's usually very clean, but it's very old fashioned. It's like one of the oldest communities in the world, the oldest cities in the world. It's something that I learned from having my children attend the school. So political issues over here, as I stated, are very different. The struggles that this uh, community in Puerto Rico has gone through is an enormous amount. We have Hurricane Maria, we have the earthquakes that just happened. They ousted the government. The governor had to resign, and now the coronavirus and the lockdown. So it's a lot of stuff. But through it all, one thing that impressed me most about the community here is how well everyone works together. They learn from each other. They really embrace each other. So when it came down to like the earthquakes and that were happening, like the neighbors were coming out, checking on each other and making sure everyone was okay. And did you feel that? Are you okay? This is what you do. And really, really embracing one another to make sure that everyone remains safe. Every holiday, I know that there's going to be a knock on my door for a relative, not a relative, but rather a neighbor coming to drop off some food because we love to eat. So, the last thing that I wanted to mention was the fact that Puerto Rico is not a state, but it's not a country. So there's been a lot of political debates over it being a commonwealth of the United States. And maybe that's something that will change in the future. But these are some of the struggles that, not struggles, but these are some of the differences between the United States and here in Puerto Rico. So what I realize is that I'm a lot more American than I knew, because I thought, you know, growing up in New York, in my, you know, Hispanic community, that, you know, I'm very Latina. But over time, and actually when I submerge myself into another culture, which the culture is here in Puerto Rico. I thought it was like my home, my family, you know, no big deal. I'm actually viewed as the Americans. And it's from the way I dress, the way I talk, the way the expectations are different, like with the education system, just being patient and kind of like observing things. But all in all, that was my cross-cultural experience and realizing that I am not who I thought I was, but by putting myself in new environments, I'm able to learn more about myself. So I am a Puerto Rican American, but I love my culture, and I love being here in Puerto Rico. I love it in Florida and in New York. It's just different. And the more exposure I have to different environments, it continues to contribute to who I am today. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye-bye.